So, to put it mildly, everything that's happening right now can feel really overwhelming. And since I was watching the events unfold at the Capitol in real time on Wednesday, and then listening to the news and following as many different trusted sources as I could on Twitter or wherever we could find it, well into the night, as I'm sure many of you were, I'm finding myself really in a state of not knowing what to say. Um, I know how I'm feeling. I know there's been a big range of, fear and anger and shock. Um, I know what my immediate responses are, but how we move forward, I find to be extremely challenging right now. So, an angry mob of insurrectionists, including several well known hate groups, extremists, and white supremacists, spurred on by our president, violently stormed the Capitol, intending to stop the certification of the Electoral College votes. And apparently, they had plans to do even worse things than that. And there were pipe bombs and death threats, and they were chanting "Hang Pence," and some of them were apparently planning on taking hostages. The Confederate flag was paraded around inside, just outside the Senate chambers. Vice President Pence and members of Congress had to be taken to secure locations. Many people inside feared for their lives, including journalists, and many were injured, and 5 people died. So I woke up the day after, feeling a little bit in shock, a little bit numb, obviously sad, angry, appalled, and speechless. And I'm guilty of doom scrolling, and it's not helping anything. The hot takes and everybody feeling compelled to point fingers and blame right now uh, doesn't help. And there's a lot more to be revealed. So plenty of overwhelming feelings, and it can be hard to know what to do. But here's what I do know. I'm grateful for this practice and for our practice together, for our community and our teachings and our teachers that are here for support. And I'm grateful that we do have guides. We have basic tenets, as Kojin reminded us of before we began this period of winter retreat. And they are a place that we can always take refuge. The 3 pillars, or the 3 pure precepts of our practice, are there, and especially important, I think, to turn to right now. So after wading through all this commentary and everybody's takes and trying to get perspective, not just in the last few days, but over the last few years especially, there is a consistent message coming from certain places, especially among historians and some journalists, that has resonated with me, which is that pushing back against it is pushing back against the common refrain that we're used to hearing, which is, this isn't who we are, or we're better than this. Something that we hear quite often from public leaders in times of crisis as a way to bolster us and encourage us to move forward and get through it. But there's a growing consensus from where I'm looking that #this is not us isn't helping. Instead, it denies the reality of the circumstances that have brought us to this moment. And it's a truth that many activists have known for a long time. But I think it's a common human reaction. I've had it myself. the need to separate ourselves. Well, that's not me. That's not who we really are. That's not most of us. That's just a few bad seeds or bad actors. You know, I'm not racist. And things are so much better now, and we abolished slavery. And this guy, our president, he's just an anomaly. So here's some alternative responses. Dr. Jacqueline Antonovich, she's a historian of medicine, gender, and politics in the American West. Like many other historians, I cringe when I hear people saying, this is not who we are. Basically, historically, it is who we are. Again and again. I think it's better to say, this is not who I want us to be. And then ask yourself what you can do to change that. One from the editor of Dissent magazine. The mob of Trumpers that smashed its way into the Capitol yesterday should serve as a rebuke to such willful innocence. The rioters, inflamed by the endless lies and racist conspiracy theories spouted from the White House, are just the latest in an unbroken tradition that is as truly American as the people of all races who have struggled for a tolerant, egalitarian, and democratic nation. One cannot honor the latter without coming to grips with the people they fought. This is the basis of Nicole Hannah-Jones' argument, who created the 1619 series in the New York Times. She encourages us to take a hard look at our real history. And our Zen practice always encourages us to open our eyes and look at what's really happening right in front of us in our own lives. And it reminds us that we're not separate from anything. The Buddha way has always pointed us to the reality that in myriad forms, a single body is revealed. A hero of mine for a long time is Bell Hooks. She's a feminist theorist and a writer and a cultural critic and a professor. And she wrote a long time ago, the most basic activism we can have in our lives is to live consciously in a nation living in fantasies. The most basic activism we can have in our lives is to live consciously in a nation living in fantasies. Also sounds to me like our own practice and how we work with our own minds. We need to live consciously within our own fantasies, in our own mind. And one more from Waging Nonviolence, the organization. They say, Donald Trump was never an aberration on America's record. He is the product of an America struggling with the poverty of an ethics of capitalism that has unleashed the cult of redemptive white nationalism. We must face the truth. This is America, and this is who we will always be until we can tell ourselves the truth about the lies we keep alive. And I am resonating with this message, I think, because our practice often shows us that we can't really avoid whatever it is that might be coming up. I think it's called the tempting term of what we want to do by pushing things away is called spiritual bypassing. As easy as it is to hope that if we just meditate hard enough and long enough, we will somehow magically become these perfect, holy, enlightened beings. And we won't have to actually deal with or look at the parts of ourselves that are uncomfortable and that we don't like. The parts of ourselves that we don't want to admit are there, right in front of us. Because it seems like it's just too difficult. And for many of us, it's this fear of being imperfect or not good enough or phony, or perhaps we're not as exceptional as we were led to believe, when really I think it's the other way around. The phony way of going about it is to deny the imperfection and the problems. Or as is commonly put another way, to pretend that our shit doesn't smell. It turns out pretending there isn't a problem doesn't make it go away. and lying about it doesn't make it true. I think most of us recognize this truth from the smallest scale to the biggest, if we practice for even a short time. And as the words of James Baldwin have become so relevant again recently, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. I think if we've ever had a destructive habit, from extremely destructive habits to even smaller habits of the way we see ourselves that might be hurtful, the way we treat others, we know that the only way to change it starts with acknowledgement and by dealing with our shit. And hearing this message, this pushback against this isn't who we are, by hearing people say this actually is who we are, made me think of Unman shit stick. It's a koan from The Gateless Barrier in the Mumonkan book. A monk asked Unman, "What is Buddha?" And Unman answered, "A shit stick." So the explanation in the book says, there's always been varied interpretations from the olden days of what the shit stick is. And it's difficult to know which one it might really be, but one version is that it's a bamboo tool used in ancient China to pick up and take away feces from the road. Apparently in those days in the country, they excreted outside. Anyway, it's the dirtiest, most contemptible thing in the world. And for Master Unman here, the whole universe was a shit stick. He himself was a shit stick. There's no room for such an idle distinction as dirty and clean. And according to this view of Buddha, there's not a single item that is not a Buddha. A shit stick is not an exception. It's a manifestation of Buddha. So an attempted insurrection is not an exception. Everything included. We're not separate from any of it. That's ours. That's not someone else's. That's ours to deal with. Now that we've won the Civil War and passed these civil rights laws, we're good, right? Aren't we all living in a civilized society now? Our practice encourages us to investigate. So I'm grateful for the voices that are saying, hey, guess what? This is us. And until we're able to acknowledge it and bear witness to it and look at it squarely in the face, we cannot heal or move forward. So how do we do it? One place to look is Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s Guiding Pillars of Nonviolence. Those pillars, which King based on Gandhi's nonviolent philosophy, are also echoed in the Zen Peacemaker tenets from our own Zen Peacemaker family. And from Kojin's Winter Angle Commitment Form, which I encourage us to look at again or take a look at, he says the framework of the Three Pure Precepts offers guidance on how we can transform our lived experience into healing and compassionate service. So the tenets, not knowing, bearing witness, taking action, are listed on the site, and you can find them there. You can do your own research. There's some notes describing them on the Zen Peacemakers site from Roshi Igikyo Nakao. She was the Zen Center, the abbot of the Zen Center of Los Angeles. But I'm going to try to put some of it into my own words, which I encourage you to do in the way that Kojin encourages us to do. So not knowing, letting go of fixed ideas about yourself and others and the universe. Difficult circumstances, political upheaval, the sudden loss of a loved one, terminal illness, how about a pandemic, can make life suddenly feel unstable. But actually, according to the Buddha, things are always unstable, and reminds us the universe, from its tiniest particles to its largest forms, is continually in flux. So not knowing trains us to continually set aside fixed points of view, which I think is the most challenging thing to do these days when it comes to politics. And this dropping away of the things we've relied on for a sense of stability can lead us to examine what we believe is our center and to take shelter in the place before anything arises. If we can let things drop away just for a minute, we can refuse nothing and receive everything that is coming in from all directions. We can at least let down perhaps one wall or one barrier, just even a little bit, and let some space come in around perhaps a different perspective or a different point of view. Bearing witness to the joy and suffering of the world. Practice of bearing witness is to see all of the aspects of a situation, including our attachments and judgments. So we can't live in just a state of not knowing, because there are conditions and causes that are right in front of us that we need to respond to by being present. And when we bear witness, we open to the uniqueness of whatever is arising and meet it just as it is. So when we combine not knowing with bearing witness, it can strengthen our capacity for spaciousness. And it can help us listen to other points of view. Our meditation practice trains us to bear witness to our own minds, our own thoughts, by strengthening our awareness of what's going on within ourselves as it's arising and falling. And as that awareness strengthens, we begin to experience spaciousness and stability. And we see that we have a choice in our response to what is arising. And that leads to taking action. Or as Kojin framed it, to serving myself and others. And this is doing good for others. But he has a lovely reminder that great compassionate action isn't necessarily large and performative. Many times it's invisible and subtle and can be something we do for ourselves. So taking action, it's impossible to predict what the action in any situation will be. But the underlying intention is that the action that arises be a caring action, which serves everyone and everything, including ourselves, in the whole situation. And for me, the important reminders of these three tenets right now helps particularly with anger. Because when we're witnessing atrocities like what happened at the Capitol and the current state of our country and our world, I think not responding from a place of destructive anger is the biggest challenge. And Kyo Roshi gave a Dharma talk about anger, and you can find it on our website. It's translated there. And she asked, the question is how we can create a spacious container so that we can feel the anger without creating more angry karma. Taking a breath, sinking into that space of not knowing, not judging, we must first surrender to the feeling of anger. Being the anger completely is not knowing, not being caught up with the story of our anger, which is really a distraction. The story of our anger is not the thing itself. Can we just sit with the experience of anger, its raw, powerful energy? If we can do that, we're not cutting it off or repressing it. On our meditation cushion, there's more of an opportunity to safely experiment with this, to observe oneself fill up with this energy, feel it, and watch it disappear just as suddenly as it appeared. And in Roshi's book, Most Intimate, she shares Master Dogen's words on the precept of not indulging in anger. He says, not advancing, not retreating, not real, not empty. There is an ocean of bright clouds. there is an ocean of solemn clouds, encouraging us to stay right in the middle of our experience. She says it is possible to respond, to speak up when necessary, if we can be utterly awake and present at the moment we speak. Awake in that we are not lost in a story or our physical sensations, but are aware of all of this and are still able to speak forthrightly. This is a skill we develop in our practice. It's the skill of being alert to our own mind, exactly where we are in that moment. Even when it's in the middle of the shit. And that is intimacy in action. For me, that's why we return to the cushion. And for me, that's why it's called practice. I'll end with some lines from Pastor Raphael Warnock's victory speech as he became the state of Georgia's first ever Black senator. He's the pastor at the former congregation of Martin Luther King Jr.'s in Atlanta. He ended his speech by speaking of his family, recalling how his father, who died in 2010, used to wake him up every morning at dawn. He continued, but it was still dark. It's dark right now. But morning comes. And scripture tells us weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. Let us rise up, greet the morning, and meet the challenges of this moment. Together we can do the necessary work and win the future for all of our children.